Dawson Rider Wiki.
Hey YouTube, Dawson Rider here. Welcome to my first official Beast Morphers International Airings spoiler review. So this is going to be a review for episode 9 or 10, depending on how you count it, because here in the US, we had that sports special count as episode 8, I believe. But it's the next episode we're supposed to get here in the US. So spoiler warning here at the top, if you don't want if you don't want Noah, he's not in this one, he was in Megaforce. If you don't want to know what's going to happen in Beast Morphers when it returns in the US, then leave the review now and come back and visit later. However, I will be doing re-reviews for the US airings. So let's dive right in because this was a big episode. Lots of things happened, some very major legacy things happening. But just to do kind of a recap review, if you remember when we left off here in the US airings, they just found out that Evox and Mayor Daniels are one and the same, so that's where we pick up. Grid Battle Force is shutting down all the morph-x supplies so that Evox can't get to it, and the Rangers are trying to formulate a plan. They end up using this, or trying to use this freeze arrow with the new formation of the Beast X cannon to stop him, but Devin wants to find another way to do it, obviously, because it's his dad, and at least he's not a deadbeat like Tyler's dad, so he's like, he's worth saving, obvs. So they're trying to figure that all out, and then it's worth noting here that they kind of interrupt this moment with Ben and Betty comedy bit. I want to bring that up because I think that's Ben and Betty's biggest problem, is they really interrupt either nice moments or like tense moments, and this reminded me a lot of the Beast Morphers finale when they were all really worried about Devin, and then all of a sudden you have a Ben and Betty bit, and this was the same thing here. They just found out his dad's Evox, it's a tense moment, they're trying to figure out plans, and then they're like, whoa, I'm gonna use the new Kirame Silver weapon, and I just didn't like the timing of that. Like, regardless of whether this is your type of humor or not, timing, guys, timing. While the other Rangers are kind of gung-ho on this plan, and they're also trying to use morph-x supplies to lure Evox out, and they have a morph-x truck, Devin is doing something really cool, which was completely unexpected. We knew this was coming, but not in this episode. He's doing research to try to figure out how to fix his dad, and he's using Ranger archives, and Ravi comes in and says, like, oh, you know, have you found anything? He's like, yeah. There was a Ranger in another dimension that had an evil problem and they tried to separate it, and it's RPM. He's talking about Dylan, Ranger Black, and he talks about how he's trying to get in touch with Dr. K, but basically she doesn't pick up the phone a lot, which sounds very Dr. K. So I was not expecting this at all. Like, we all knew, or most of us, that Dr. K was going to be making an appearance in this season, but I had no idea it was going to be this episode, and she actually does appear. It's not just a mention. We'll get to that in a second. But they basically have this plan to lure Evox and trick him, and they have this morph-x truck so that he can stay in his like weird body thing. And I like that there is a scene where they actually explain why he needs the morph-x because of the way the virus interfaces with him. I thought that was a nice touch because I was kind of confused about how that worked in the first half of the season, and it was just a nice little throwaway line. But basically they're trying to hijack this morph-x truck. The Rangers stop them, and Steel blows it up. I don't know why there was like a brief scene when Devin's like, oh, why'd you go and blow up a perfectly good truck? I'm like, dude, they were gonna get away with it. Who cares about the truck? And then there's this moment where it seems like Scrozzle overhears them saying, oh, there's one morph-x power we couldn't drain, so we're gonna have to pretend it's drained. And then Scrozzle's like, it turns out that was actually part of the plan. They're doing it to lure Evox there. There was lots of little smart moments like in this episode, which I'll get to again at the end, but that was really nice and smart, because ordinarily I feel like Scrozzle legit would have heard their plan, because like in soap operas, they talk about their biggest secrets out in the open, but that was a smart plan. But then Devin does get a call back from Dr. K, and she's kind of looking fine, to be honest. Like, I'm like, am I into Dr. K? She looks the same, but older. Like all people when they age. She's talking to him about, and she says, you know, the situation with Ranger Black was very different from this. I don't think I can help you, but I did hear about a situation with someone called Xenowing, and she talks about the split from Doomwing from Dino Charge, and I like this idea that all the dimensions are communicating, and I think that was really cool. A really nice tie-in. Really cool to see Dr. K. I hope this isn't the last time we see her. I hope that this still maybe ties into RPM somehow more, and this isn't just it. But still, it was a nice surprise, and I like that it was a surprise because this was known, like we knew about this, so the surprise of her being in it I think was taken away, but I did not expect her to be in this episode. It was a cool touch. I like the Grid Battle Force is in touch with different dimensions. They even mention that it's a different dimension so that you're not confused. They don't clarify that Dino Charge is in a different dimension, but given that they did that last season, I'm sure that's kind of just implied, since it's implying that all these dimensions are in contact, and they implied that during Dimensions in Danger. I just said the word dimensions so many times. But she gets him on the trail of the split emitter from Dino Charge, and then we find out Nate has a secret Ranger vault of old Ranger tech. I kind of wish that was foreshadowed a bit earlier, and I'll talk about that at the end, but they separate, and basically the other Rangers are like, okay, if Devin's plan doesn't succeed, we gotta freeze this guy, but Devin, you go try to do this and look in the Ranger Vault. And something I liked about this was, I liked that they didn't do that thing where they're like, oh my god, we need all 5 of us together or we're useless. I liked that, especially because Devin had a personal interest, they were separating them and allowing them both to come up with different plans. So then they go into the Ranger Vault, which is Ranger Vault, and Ben and Betty are there. Unfortunately, they don't ruin it too much. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate Ben and Betty, but just, again, timing, guys. There's a ton of old Ranger tech and Easter eggs and stuff in there, and lots of questions about stuff like, how did it get there? I might do a separate video just talking about what was in there, so I don't spend 3 minutes trying to list everything. But there's lots of stuff in there. The only one I wanted to note was they do pay special attention to the shift morphers from RPM, which was where Venjix was at the end of the series. I don't know if that means anything, could be reading into it, but still. They find the split emitters, and there's this whole thing about how they're out of power, so they're gonna need morph-x to power it. Like, I get the morph-x is your power source, but I'm pretty sure the Dino Charge Rangers didn't have morph-x. Like, you know regular energy still exists. But they find the split emitters, the other Rangers lure Evox there, they're trying to arrow him, but he's like, I'm not taking an arrow to the knee, I've played Skyrim, and he deflects it back, and then Devin shows up, and he tricks Evox into thinking he's letting him pass because he turns into Mayor Daniels and he's like, please son, let me go. And he's like, all right. Then he has like that little sly smile like, and he tricks him into walking into this area, and he has the split emitters transported, and they separate the two, like Doomwing and Zinowing. One thing I also really liked about the use of the split emitters was that it was building off of something from a previous season that was a similar situation. Likewise with them mentioning Dylan. That was really cool, but specifically with the split emitters, it reminded me a little bit of when Overdrive had that one, like, Fireheart Dragon scale. Like, it was a small connection, it wasn't necessarily necessary, but including it in just kind of enriched the universe and was a nice little detail that took something that could have been mundane and made it far more interesting. And then there's kind of, you know, a nice scene at the end, like, yay, you're back. And the commander asks Mayor Daniels, which was smart, like, hey, do you remember anything from your time as Evox? Because we could use that intel. And he reveals to us exactly when he got possessed, which was when the explosion went off at the end of the first season. And the last thing he remembers is when we saw him looking at his hand. So he doesn't have any intel at the moment unless they can bring dormant memories out. But that kind of closes that off. And then unfortunately there is a comedic bit at the end. Again, I don't mind, but I feel this episode should have just ended on the nice moment between Devin and his dad. But yeah, this was a really cool episode, and I forgot to even mention, because I really wanted to get to the Dr. K Ranger Vault stuff, that the Megazord fight of this episode debuted the Beast X King Megazord formation with the Beast X Zord and yellow and blue, which is basically replacing red, which is cool because they basically decided to go through with this formation because they knew Devin was going to be busy, so that was kind of just a cool reason that made sense. So it was like a lot happened. We debuted a new Megazord form, Dr. K done showed up, and we got the Ranger Vault, and the Evox and his dad stuff. I kind of wish that they had dragged that out a bit. Like, I think that was a really interesting dynamic that could have been ripe for a lot more stories, but still, I really enjoyed this episode. Honestly, the only things I didn't like was the Ben and Betty stuff, just because I felt it really undercut moments that were either nice or tense, and I think it's okay to, you know, not have that comedy bit in there all the time. Like, that just bothered me, but other than that, I really loved the Ranger Vault. Like, I know that there's a lot of questions about it, and I do kind of wish they would have set stuff like that up earlier, but since they mentioned things like Rita and other dimensions earlier in the season, it didn't feel that out of left field, but we've just had such a lack of connectivity these last 10 years that this was really, really cool. I hope that we get more little things like this as we go on, especially since we're going for the crossover. As we go on. Get it? Get it? Because RPM. Those are not googly eyes. Dr. K showing up, it was short and nice as she felt perfectly in character. Again, I hope it's not the last we see her, but it was a really nice surprise. And as I mentioned earlier, it was cool that it actually surprised me, since I knew it was coming, but since it showed up earlier, it actually still managed to be a nice surprise. So it was a really strong episode, really unexpected. It really gets my hopes up for the second half of the season, hopefully not too much, because I felt pretty lackluster about the first half outside of a couple episodes. So I'm hoping that there's more surprises around the corner. Just, guys, calibrate the humor. humor and stuff like that. So I might do one more video where I talk about the stuff in the Ranger Vault, but if you watched the episode, what did you guys think? Did you enjoy the Ranger Vault, or were you upset about some of the things being confusing in it? Did you enjoy Dr. K's cameo? Let me know in the comments as always. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and hit that bell notifications on my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.